Neville Goddard once said, "What you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you have already found it." You found it in the form of desire. Now, this might not make any sense to me back in the days when I first came across this information. But over the course, as the conditions or the programming in mind was released, I began to understand exactly what it is that he's talking about. Everything that I've ever desired had been actualized into form by simply accepting that I am that already, which I desire to be. And over the journey, as the conditions of not being who I am had fallen away, I can honestly say the experience can be described as fulfillment for no reason. So anytime a desire arises, I know it points to the fact that I am fulfilled. In other words, I already have what I desire, because I am that which I desire to be. Thus, you are that which you desire to be. So why this is helpful is, as the individual knows that they are that which they desire to be, and by that it is meant they are completely fulfilled, everything happens naturally and effortlessly, spontaneously, in flow. So what a person does, what they don't do, what they say, what they don't say, happens naturally, effortlessly. This was also inspired by a number of questions that I received. Is, can I talk about the difference between being and doing? Or sometimes I get it as being, doing, having. And I said, what's the difference? Everything happens naturally, effortlessly, spontaneously. So what you do, what you don't do, what you say, what you don't say happens naturally. It just does not appear that way through the programming or the conditioning in mind. So just dissolve the conditioning, release the conditioning. Perfect example would be individual desires to start a business. So they have an idea and they might start thinking, how can I find people to help me with my business? They may think about the different areas of business, the way I segment it, for example, innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership. They may look at the different areas of bringing in the business, like the prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, ongoing business with existing clients. They may think about the optimization, the automation, delegation, or elimination. They may think about the physical assets, digital assets, intangible assets, and the relationships that make up the business. And think, how am I going to do all these things? It sounds like a lot of work. So, as mentioned, everything happens naturally, effortlessly, and spontaneously from the sure foundation of being completely fulfilled. So, practically speaking, people naturally show up to play the roles in your business, and they do the things that you genuinely don't want to do. It's not like you have to force yourself to do the sales if sales is not the area of interest for you. You may really love doing the innovation. You may really love coming up with ideas. Do you know that there's people that are profoundly proficient at seeing those ideas into fruition? There's even technology that we have now that is designed to take an individual, an entrepreneur's idea and see it into fruition. And they just do what they love to do. The rest is taken care of. So, by knowing that you are completely fulfilled, existence is fulfillment, being is fulfillment, everything happens effortlessly, naturally, spontaneously. What you do, what you don't do, etc. So there's no concern about these areas in flow. I trust you notice this. While in flow, there is a reconciliation of divergent thinking and convergent thinking. It reconciles into what I refer to as lateral being or harmonious being. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual as one. Not this versus that, this and that in perfect harmony. So divergent thinking can be looked at as the unknown or seeing things from many different perspectives. Convergent thinking may be looked at as known or well-established solutions. Is one way better than another? No, absolutely not. There's no confusion in flow. Everything just happens. Whether you go with something that has never been done before, in relation to, let's say, marketing or sales, or if you go with a well-established marketing solution that an agency is offering, you naturally go with the one that you feel right with in flow. You naturally do it effortlessly, spontaneously, it happens. You know, he said one time in his wonderful book, Awakened Imagination, knowing that every desire is ripe grain for they who know how to think from the end, they are indifferent to mere reasonable probability. So as mentioned, it's the conditioning or the programming in mind that generates thoughts that suggest I must do this or that in order to get what I want. And if I can't do this or that, or if I think I can't do this or that, more accurately put, or if there's no such thing as something that can help me or someone that can help me in this particular area, then what happens is the individual feels stress, frustration, confusion, overthinking, etc. So thinking from the end is relating to the different appearances along the way from the end. So a simple way to do it is some way, somehow it's taken care of. Some way, somehow it's taken care of. I don't know how it's taken care of, but some way, somehow. So I may have an idea and I say, okay, I'm going to move forward with this idea. A great example would be flow-based prosperity, my group coaching and mastermind service. Now I've been doing this for years in the various areas of entrepreneurship, but let's use that as an example. When I started with flow-based prosperity, I ended up with an idea of, and this was a conversation that I had with Ed, who's a client of mine, and you may remember the video that I did where he grew his business to success, generating multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars per month. I'll link in the description to that video. We had a conversation. He shared his business growth, insights, perspectives. We talk about being in flow, etc. And one of the things that he mentioned to me is when we were hanging out, hey, why don't you start a mastermind? And the idea was interesting to me, and I felt the desire lightly there. It was lightly there, we can say it that way. And then it wasn't after I edited the video ready to go up that the desire emerged to put together a mastermind. So now I have this video that I created with Ed, again, I'll link in the description to it, and I have this desire that emerged to put together a mastermind. And so I put a little opt-in form at the bottom in the description of the video, and I said, if anyone's interested, I'm considering doing a mastermind, you can just join this mailing list, and once I have it put together, then I'll let you know about it. Just like that. Simple, effortless, didn't take that long to do. It was literally a few minutes, and I didn't use a fancy landing page or anything like that. So what happened was I got so many people onto that list that when I was ready to start the mastermind, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, what kind of format I was going to do it, because I've never done something like this before. But one thing I did know is I knew from personal experience what kind of mastermind I would like, what I would like it to feel like, what kind of conversations I would like to have. And for me, it was very important to have no shame, no condemnation, as I always say, and also a place where people can explore and share anything in relation to their vision, even if it appears to be directly related or indirectly related in a way that benefits everyone. So pure masterminding. So I imagine that it is that way. You know, desire points to fulfillment. When you know you have what you desire, you naturally imagine yourself having what you desire. So why I titled this mind map, Articulating Fulfillment, is all of this is an articulation of fulfillment. When I look at Neville's work, I see it that way. I say he is articulating his style, and what he's pointing to is the fact that we are completely fulfilled. And it's through desire, as he said here. We know that we are fulfilled in form. Yet we are completely fulfilled prior, and by accepting that we have what we desire, or that we are already that which we desire to be, everything plays out naturally without that resistance generated by that conditioning. It's exactly like how he said. What you now desire, you already have, and you seek it only because you have already found it. You found it in the form of desire. So what ended up happening then, and you may hear some background noise, I'm recording this in Mexico, I'm using a different microphone setup. What happened was I announced that I'm doing this mastermind, and I had no idea of how I was going to do it. Now there's some more nuances in relation to it. There was another client that just so synchronistically at that time asked me if I was doing a mastermind. And as part of our consulting deal, I said, you can have access to the mastermind. He got really excited about it. So he was actually the first member of Flow-Based Prosperity. Shout out to Simon. So there was a number of things that came together, but I didn't have that, as I mentioned, it was a slight desire, but then all of a sudden I had that desire emerge to do it, move forward with it. So I committed to it. And then the first step emerged. Again, all those things that the individual thinks that they need to do, the marketing, the sales, the operations, the finance, the leadership, the prospecting, lead generation, client acquisition, ongoing business with existing clients, optimization, automation, delegation, elimination, all these things get taken care of. Where do I find the physical assets, if there was physical assets involved, the digital assets, the technologies, etc., the relationships and the intangible assets, knowledge, wisdom, expertise, they naturally emerge. I can assure you, they naturally emerge. So this is what I mean. I ended up just with an idea of, okay, we'll do a Zoom session, maybe once a week. I sent out the email and then I filled it up to capacity. I wanted 50 people to start with so we could do this and run it for a phase. And then it turns out that I actually prefer to only have 50 people at a time on this mastermind per month. So that idea just emerged like that, and then it ended up working out. I had an idea to do a Zoom session, and then all of a sudden I said, let's do 2 Zoom sessions. Let's do coaching, group coaching on Mondays, and then masterminding on Thursdays. And it played out exactly the way that I imagined. Now, what also emerged from that was a number of opportunities. Like, let's do in-person meetups, let's do events. Danielle Lynn and I did 2 events that spawned from Flow-Based Prosperity. We did one in California, we did one in New York, all these things. And she was one of the first members of Flow-Based Prosperity as well. So all of these things just happen naturally and effortlessly in flow. And over the course of the years, I can assure you, all I did was decondition the subconscious mind, or you could say reprogram the subconscious mind, which is really just releasing the conditions, the thoughts of lack of limitation, which spawns from beliefs in the subconscious mind. And it's not a lot of work to do it. Anytime a thought that arises that suggests you can't do this, you must do it in a way that does not feel natural, it's going to be stress or force-based, I just don't identify with that thought. It's like we discuss in the 7-Day Mental Diet videos. If you haven't seen them, I'll link to the first one I did, the 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox. I just don't identify with those thoughts that suggest otherwise in relation to the vision, what I saw in my imagination. And it plays out. And it plays out in known and unknown ways. By that is meant what I imagined played out. So the conversations were like that. The experiences have been like that. And even things that I did not imagine, parts that fill up the whole, it filled in the space. It just filled up and was completely in harmony. Because, see, the sure foundation is fulfillment. I know that I am fulfillment. I am equals fulfillment, complete fulfillment, or I am perfection. Now, if I say to you, you are perfection, you exist as perfection, you might not know what that looks like, or you might imagine what that looks like. So he one time said in Awakened Imagination, we must go on imagining better than the best we know. So you may imagine what you know to be that perfection. Yet when that is manifested into form, you'll imagine greater. And this goes on for eternity because there's no limit to your perfection. You are perfect, absolutely. And perfection just unfolds more so. So you are perfect. You exist as perfection. I am that pure awareness. And my real nature is perfection. And where do you experience that perfection? You experience that perfection in consciousness. In consciousness, as stated in Genesis 1:3. And God said, the light shall be, and the light was. So again, I am that pure awareness. The light is pure consciousness. Now, pure consciousness, as it was in the beginning, is perfection. Again, I don't know what that looks like. Do you know what that looks like? Totally looks like? We get glimpses of it through desire. Through desire, we experience our perfection more and more so. That's a way of saying it. That's why I titled the mind map again, Articulating Fulfillment. So when I read Neville's lectures and his books, this is how I read it. I say, oh, he's articulating fulfillment. He's discussing how to access that fulfillment. Through desire, you access that fulfillment. You know that you are fulfilled. And then it plays out. So then you know that you are fulfilled in that regard. So the fulfillment appears. But there's no limit to that fulfillment. There's no limit to that perfection. That's why I always say, you are love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. Because there's no limit to the infinite love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment that you are. And so by simply existing without the conditions, you do see it. Joy for no reason, fulfillment for no reason, bliss for no reason, happiness for no reason. That is what I call the flow-based journey to actualizing the vision. So in relation to my story, all those things of how it played out and the people that came together and the physical assets, digital assets, intangible assets, and even the optimization, automation, delegation, elimination, partner and whole, and combination in the various areas in relation to that initiative relate to, which we can call innovation, sales, marketing, operations, finance, leadership. All those areas got taken care of. Now, if I use these very technical entrepreneurial terms, it might seem like a lot of work, or it could seem on the surface as a lot of things to do. But that's just conditioning, because as mentioned, all these things are neutral. It's the individual in mind that can imagine what these words mean to them. And I personally recommend not imagining in a way that suggests you lack or limit or can't do. And also, don't worry about how to do. That's a nuanced point. It gets taken care of, I can assure you. It gets taken care of. I learned this in 2004 through Think and Grow Rich. He said in there something like, if you believe that money is the result of hard work alone, perish the thought. When I first read that, I found it to be very triggering. What is being triggered? The conditioning or the programming in mind is being triggered by that statement. In other words, I was subconsciously relating to what he said in a way where I had resistance appearing in the body. Thoughts that suggest, no way this can be true. There's just no way. Why? Because at that point, I wasn't thinking from the end. I wasn't thinking from the premise of fulfillment. As he says here, knowing that every desire is ripe grain to them who knows how to think from the end, they are indifferent to mere reasonable probability. So I was thinking, oh, wait, I haven't seen anyone do that. If I look at my past, I was working very hard. I was delivering flyers when I was a teenager, working really hard. Then I got jobs in warehouses. And, I did like the logistic part of the warehouses because I thought it was interesting. And that played a role in my IT career, as later on in my IT career, I got into warehouse management systems and tech in relation to it, operations side of things with tech. Yet, it was a lot of hard work. It was very hard. And so I remember saying to myself, I don't care how hard I have to work. I just want to make money. I just don't want to be broke. So interestingly, I ended up at $50,000 debt, though, because I had an inharmonious relationship with money. And part of that inharmonious relationship with money was that I have to work very hard and stress myself out in order to make it. And you could say through force, I was willing to do more stress and hard work to make it happen. And so he's suggesting that that's not the way it is, or so it appears that way. Now, in my own mind, I can think for myself. I can say, well, I can be open to this. Can I be open to this? So he had that chapter on auto-suggestion, which, as mentioned in the earlier stages, auto-suggestion was very helpful for me to release that conditioning in mind. It was stored in the other chapter he had mentioned, subconscious mind. First time I heard of subconscious mind. Just a metaphysical concept. Contains the beliefs, memories, etc., life experiences, reference experiences. So what I was interested in is dissolving those conditions or those beliefs, the programming in the subconscious mind that was generating resistance for the money flowing in a more effortless, joyous, flow-based way. And it happened. I got out of $50,000 debt, and over the years, I kept dropping the conditions in relation to, and we discussed this in Thursday's video. If you haven't seen it, I'll link in the description to it. The 6 basic fears chapter. They were fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. Fear of criticism is things like looking around to see what other people are going to think. You are the only thinker in mind, so you can only think what they think. You think what they think. To prove the point, If you're about to do something, let's say you're about to make a video on YouTube, that was one of the ideas you had, or you were about to put out a mastermind. If all of a sudden you think, what are my friends going to think? What are people from my school going to think? What are people from my work going to think? The individual may get really identified with that thinking and then not allow themselves to do the thing that they genuinely desire to do. So that's the conditioning in mind. When the conditioning dissolves away, then what happens is you just naturally do the thing. You just effortlessly do the thing. Now, for me, over the years, I was releasing the conditioning in relation to these areas: fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love of someone, old age, death, etc. What I noticed was, you can say, I started to live freely. I just do what I love to do. That's it. And everything just happens naturally, effortlessly, in flow. Inner and outer are one. I don't see them as separate. As I mentioned, in flow, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, reconcile as what I call lateral being. Not this versus that. Naturally, body flows. That is the result of releasing this conditioning that's stored in the subconscious mind. So, how do you release the conditioning? Well, you may get an idea. You accept that you are that which you desire to be. And then along the way, in relation to appearances, you think from the end. So one of the ways of thinking from the end is, some way, somehow, this contributes to my vision. I don't know how. Whatever appears, some way, somehow, this contributes to my vision. It doesn't mean that I won't get what I want or experience that I want. Some way, somehow, it contributes to my vision. Or there might be a thought that appears in mind, and it's very persistent, arguing with me or imagining people arguing with them. That's why I say now, know that you are completely fulfilled, because there's no reason to argue with people in your imagination, which can play out as theater. So you argue with people in imagination, and now you're arguing with people and creating conflict in your business and all this force and stress with team members, vendors, clients, etc., business partners. I am completely fulfilled. As I know that I am completely fulfilled, and you and I know different. You are that pure awareness. Your real nature is fulfillment. How do you know? You experience it in consciousness. Where else do you experience your fulfillment? Apart from consciousness, you experience it in consciousness. Awareness and consciousness are one. Reflections of being, you can say. Reflection of being. You're just articulating fulfillment. What does that mean, articulating fulfillment? Or why do I say it that way? Life is art. You're just artfully, through creative expression, through living life essentially, expressing what you desire spontaneously by accepting that you are that which you desire to be. And it happens. And it continues, as he said, we must go on imagining better than the best we know. That could sound like a force-based thing. We must go on. It just naturally happens without resistance, in flow. Naturally, it unfolds more so. And all those areas get taken care of, for example, in entrepreneurship. The innovation, the sales, the marketing, the operations, the finance, the leadership. If you'd like to get into more detail about these areas, then I recommend my entrepreneurial program. I'll link in the description to it. Yet, one doesn't need to worry about those things I talk about in the program. You may do those things, or people may show up to do those things. Yet, when you know those things, what they are, you're not afraid of those things. Because you see, those things are parts that make up the whole of the entrepreneurial venture. All my 5 programs and everything that I talk about has been a result of, I used to listen to the Steve Jobs commencement speech over and over again, back when I was building my IT business. He said, you connect the dots looking backwards and see how it happened. So if I connect the dots looking backwards, and I talk about my experiences, connecting the dots looking backwards, and then when I share my experiences, through my book, for example, through these videos, through my programs, one-on-one sessions, coaching, consulting, the mastermind, what happens is the individuals might, based on conditioning, they might say, but I can't do that. Or that is not something I want to do. I don't want to do the marketing. And I say, perfectly fine. And they might look at me like, what are you talking about, perfectly fine? I say, completely fine. They say, who said you have to do the marketing? I said, Ed, for example, runs a marketing agency. There are many people that do the things that you don't want to do, and they love to do those things. And they're great at doing those things. Everyone appears to be in harmony. Assets, physical, digital, intangible, everything appears to be in harmony. Remember, as I brought up recently. I am everything, I am nothing at the same time. Not I am nothing versus I am everything, or I am everything versus I am nothing. Inner and outer are one as perfect harmony, in perfect harmony. It just does not appear that way through the conditioning. You are here to experience your fulfillment. You are completely fulfilled. And you are here to experience what that fulfillment is like, as what we can call a fulfilling life. And your fulfilling life is not better than another individual's fulfilling life. Everything spontaneously, naturally arises from the same source, completely fulfilled. We just play a harmonious role together. That's what happens. We play a harmonious role. In entrepreneurship, it's roles like vendor, client, business partner, investor, etc., etc. And if it didn't go in a way that we can call harmonious, that's okay. No shame, no condemnation. Now's the time. Now's the only time to think from the end. By imagining yourself being that which you desire to be. By imagining yourself having what you desire in relation to whatever appears. So when he had said something indifferent to mere reasonable probability, that's built on the foundation, the mere reasonable probability of that kind of reasoning in mind that the individual becomes identified with, and they say that's the only way to do it. You can only do it these ways. And you say, why? Why is it those ways? No shame, no condemnation. Because this person did it, and these books say that you do it this way. And if it's not within the books or what other people say, then it doesn't work. There are infinite ways. You might not have access to these ways. They're unknown ways. And I'm not suggesting that those ways that were talked about in the books or where people shared were not helpful. They can be helpful. Not this versus that. You may go with those ways. You may not go with those ways. You may go with new ways. We don't worry about that. It spontaneously, naturally happens in flow, which is why I always say make flow a priority. Because while in flow, you just remain in flow. You just know that you are that which you desire to be. You just accept that you are that which you desire to have. You already have what you desire. You are completely fulfilled. See, flow is the natural result of being as you are. Being as you are is the natural result of knowing who you are. You are that which is. Everything just is. Reality just is. God just is. Truth just is. What is? Be as is. Pure being. Beyond conditions. Conditions fall away. Or you can say, abide as I am. Be as is. Be as is. I am everything, I am nothing at the same time. As is. Just like in a meditation. You can live your life that way. The experience can be described as flow. Anytime thoughts arise that suggest you need to do this or that, force-based, stress-based, how am I going to figure it out? No longer identify with those thoughts. Those thoughts appear to disappear, and the way emerges in wonderful ways, I can assure you. Wonderful ways. Better ways than I could have thought of. You know, it says in the Bible, my ways are past finding out. So God's ways transcend the contents of my subconscious mind. That which I had put in the subconscious mind, my reference experiences, stories, etc., skills, what I know, beliefs, conditions, programming, etc., the infinite ways of God transcend those. So I don't form a bias and suggest what I have in my mind is the best way, or what this other person has in their mind is the best way. The way is the way it is. It just naturally unfolds. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. You could say, I remain as I am, articulating fulfillment. I know that I am completely fulfilled, here to experience my fulfillment. My fulfillment appears more so with increasing frequency on a continuous basis. People and everything appears to be in harmony with me, as I am that prior to what appears, as I am that nothing prior to what appears. Everything and nothing in perfect harmony as one now. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.